Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today we're going to be going over the last of the Necromancer poison skills, which is Poison Nova. Poison Nova is probably the best skill in this tree, as long as you're not trying to build a physical damage Necromancer. It definitely has, I think, the best damage output for a poison skill. And it does require, of course, the 20 synergies from Poison Dagger and Poison Explosion to get the maximum effect. But once you have it capped out to its highest level, the damage output that it does is pretty decent. Now, it has to be usually augmented by using other pieces of equipment. So, normally you're going to need a pretty high amount of negative enemy poison resistance. You're also going to want a pretty nice amount of positive poison skill damage. And then on top of that, you're also going to want to utilize the skill Lower Resistance to bring down the monster's resistance to poison. All of this together actually does add up to a pretty nice damage output when it comes to your Poison Nova. And let me go ahead and pull this up real quick. So if we were to head out here into the Frigid Highlands, and this is on P8, or at least it should be on P8 anyway. Definitely is. And we're going to go ahead and summon our golem. I guess I have a fire golem for some reason on this character. Whatever. We're going to go ahead and cast our lower resistance on the target, and then once we cast our Poison Nova, you'll notice that it does a pretty significant amount of damage to all the monsters nearby. Now, one thing that you got to know about Poison Nova is that it only lasts for 2 seconds. And it doesn't need to be spammed. So a lot of people don't know this about poison skills, is that poison skills don't stack. So especially when it comes to Poison Nova, which has a relatively fast cast speed, there's no reason to be doing this. You don't need to be spamming it like this. Alright? It has a 2-second duration, and when you poison the target, they are poisoned for that 2 seconds, and during those 2 seconds they will continually take damage. You don't need to re-poison them until they are no longer green. Once they turn no longer green, then you definitely want to poison them again. But as long as they are green, they are under the effect of the poison damage, and casting it again only refreshes the duration. It doesn't add additional damage, and it most definitely does not do anything for you except for drain your mana away. Now, granted, if you have another person nearby who is also spamming poison spells, it also doesn't stack with theirs either. So there's also some silliness going on there. So say, for instance, you had 2 Necromancers. One was level 50 Poison Nova, and one was level 51 Poison Nova. The level 51 Poison Nova would override the level 50, and you would get absolutely no damage from the level 51 Poison Nova. Sorry, the 50. The 51 would be the overriding measure. In fact, all poison damage tends to work this way, is that the higher damage poison, it takes over and overrides the lower damage poison, and they don't stack. And this has always been an issue with poison damage, is that you really, like, if you have multiple poison damage characters in a group, only the highest poison damage character is really doing any damage to the monster at any given time. There is also a bug when it comes to poison damage that needs to be discussed. So, anytime a monster hits a monster that is poisoned, whether it be a skeleton, a golem, an NPC, another player, it doesn't matter what it is. Anytime anything hits a monster that is poisoned, the poison damage is actually interrupted for that frame. And the more times that a monster is hit while he is poisoned, the more times the poison damage is interrupted. Now, you might think to yourself, well, if it's interrupted, it still applies the full poison damage, but it doesn't. Any frame where the poison damage is interrupted is not applied to the target and is not added on to the end of the poison duration either. So it is just simply lost damage. So when you're building a Necromancer specifically who is utilizing poison damage, the army actually causes the damage to decrease. The more times that you would attack a monster, like for instance if you have Raised Skeleton, if you've got Raised Skeleton Mage, if you have Revives, if you have a Golem of any type, your Mercenary, all of these monsters will interfere with the poison damage output, decreasing it for every single time that they attack. And I have tested this conclusively in the past, and I actually have a video up on my channel already that goes over this in detail, as well as has some, like final results. And if you take a look on my live streams, you'll find a video that says poison damage is broken. And in the description of the video, I have the final results of my tests. And I'd like to go over some of those really quickly with you to give you an idea of what it is that we're dealing with. So just really quickly, let me explain the test, okay? So when you're fighting Diablo, let's say you have Diablo on players 8, how long does it take to kill him? That's the question, right? So if you go into a Diablo run on a players 8 run, or I might have also tested this in players 1 at some times as well. But basically what I did was I ran a Necromancer with a poison dagger. I let the army kill him by himself, okay? So I did not touch Diablo. I let the army do the job by itself to see how long it would take the army to kill Diablo. It took the army 1 minute and 27 seconds to kill Diablo, okay? Then I joined in. I did the run again, and I did this like 2 or 3 times, by the way, so I tested it with multiple attempts to remove any variables. Me and the army was 23 seconds, so I was able to kill Diablo much faster when I joined in with my army. However, the last time I tested with me only. And with me only, no army, I killed Diablo in 19 seconds. The army actually slowed down my damage output and caused me to kill Diablo slower than I otherwise normally would have. In fact, 19 seconds with me only and 23 seconds and me with the army, not only did they interrupt the poison damage, but in general, they slowed down the entire procedure. And I proceeded to test this in multiple ways. I did Druid, I did Rabies Druids, I did Venom, I did all sorts of stuff, and the results of these are all available to you if you want to check them out. But the moral of the story is that the more monsters that you have hitting a target, the less your poison damage is actually effective by. And so the general gist of what I'm trying to tell you here is that building a Summon Necromancer alongside a Poison Necromancer negates the poison damage. The more minions you have, the less your poison damage actually does to the monsters that you're fighting. Now, granted, when you're fighting like a big group of monsters and your army is all spread out, so like when it's all spread out across the entire field and they're not really so much focusing on a specific target, in those situations your poison damage does decently because you don't really have all of the monsters stacked onto a specific target. However, anytime you're fighting a boss with the summon army, the army is actually going to slow down the killing of the monster tremendously. In fact, it gets to the point where it literally will negate your poison damage almost entirely at certain points, depending on how many minions you have. In my tests, I didn't test with a full army of revives. I only tested with the skeletons themselves. And with the skeletons already, they were slowing down the poison damage to the point where I was killing slower. With the addition of the revives on top of that, I would imagine that at that point the poison damage would essentially be doing nothing. To give you a more advanced sort of idea of what's going on, the game is based on 25 frames. So 25 frames is the tick rate, I guess you could call it, or whatever you want to explain it as. And in those 25 frames, 25 actions can happen at any given time. The poison damage is ticking over those 25 frames. It ticks 25 times a second. Anytime a monster attacks during any of those 25 frames, it will consume a frame. The more frames that it consumes, the less the poison damage does. So if you have, for instance, say 25 frames of your poison damage and 13 skeletons have attacked one time each during that frame, 13 of your 25 frames have been consumed, and you're left with, my quick math is always terrible, 12 frames, I think, 12 frames. So you're only left with 12 frames of your damage, which means your poison damage has essentially been cut in half. with Poison and Bone, the Poison and Bone tree, there are definitely some very fun builds, and like I said, it's definitely more damaging and better if you kind of avoid a full army. Now, granted, having like one golem and like a minion is not going to cause that much of an effect on your damage output. It really only starts to really add up when you have like the full army, the golem, the mercenary, like the full revive army on top of that, and then you're in like a player's 8 game and you've got all your friends with you and they're attacking too, and by the time you're done, your poison output damage is basically zero. Now, with this particular ability, there are a lot of items that can help support this ability, and you're really going to want to get your hands on these if you want to build a Poison Nova Necromancer. The Trangle's Wing, the Trangle's Girth Belt, the Trangle's Gloves. This 3-piece combination right here is actually best in slot for pretty much any poison damage Necromancer. You're going to want to be using this 3-piece. And the reason is because number one, and I seem to have hacked this Trangle's with 107% faster cast. That's hilarious. But the reason why you want to use this is because it has the 25% poison skill damage, which is absolutely amazing. The Wing, on the other hand, has the negative 25% enemy poison resistance, which is also amazing. So these two in combination add a huge amount of damage to your Poison Nova. And then, of course, the Trangle's Girth is an obvious choice because it has the Cannot Be Frozen on it, which allows you to use another Soj or another Bolcathos or whatever it is that you're using to get some more plus to skills, because you don't necessarily have to worry about the Cannot Be Frozen anymore. You don't have to wear a Raven Frost, for instance. Another very important item that you can get your hands on is a Death's Web, which I don't believe I have a Death's Web. Oh, no, I do have a Death's Web. Look at that. A Death's Web is negative 50% enemy poison resistance, and this one is absolutely amazing for Poison Nova Necromancers. It is one of your end-game best-in-slot items for this particular build, and it's also extremely rare and extremely valuable. So bring out your pocketbooks, because you're going to have to pay for it. I think that's pretty much it for this ability. I mean, the only other thing I think we can go over is the fact that it's not an AoE ability; it's actually missiles. So let's go over that really quickly before we end this. So if you look at Poison Nova, you might notice that it resembles something else in the game very similarly. And the thing that it resembles very similarly is actually teeth. Notice that it looks like teeth. Poison Nova is actually teeth. It's just green teeth. Well, they're horribly taken care of teeth. The guy hasn't brushed in ages, okay? He hasn't brushed. There's no mouthwash. He hasn't been to the dentist. All right? They're green and brown, and that's just what they are. Now, why does this matter? Well, because they're individual missiles. That's one of the reasons why, number one, Poison Nova is such a laggy ability. I'm not sure if you guys have ever, like, super lagged up your character before, or your game with Poison Nova back in the day, but it's because every single one of those little dots is a missile. Now, unfortunately, just like Teeth, Poison Nova has a next hit delay, and that means that you can't hit a monster more than one time with a individual missile. So, like, for instance, when you shoot teeth at targets, as it hits a target, the teeth are consumed, and you can't hit one target more than one time with teeth. So no matter how amazing your teeth are, and no matter how well you shotgun the teeth, it's not going to hit a target twice with the same ability. And Poison Nova is the same way, because it's missiles, and the missiles have a next hit delay. You can't hit a target more than once. Not that hitting a target more than once would really ever do anything, because as we talked about earlier, the poison damage doesn't stack. And this is, of course, a problem. I also built another Theorycraft character. This was an older one that kind of was based off of the idea of multiple poison explosions. And this was actually where I kind of found out for myself that poison damage doesn't stack. I have a theory craft on him as well. It was called the Spreading Plague, and I'm not even sure if he still exists within my files. It's been a long time since I've checked. But basically how the Spreading Plague was set up is he was set up to spam Poison Novas as fast as humanly possible. There he is right there. The Spreading Plague could literally chain gun Poison Novas. And this was where I learned, without a shadow of a doubt, that chain gunning Poison Novas doesn't have any effect. And there are two reasons for this, and we discussed them earlier, but one is the fact that the highest damage poison effect is always going to take precedent over the lower damage poison effect. So the level 15 Poison Nova that's on Andariel's Visage, the level 20 Poison Nova that's on the Breath of the Dying Berserker's Axe, and the level 41 that I have on my character are all different levels, and the 41 overwrites the others. But the general idea of this particular build was that I would go around and I would kill things, and as I killed things, more Poison Novas would come out as I killed them. And as things died, you would see all these crazy Poison Novas come out of the character, because I was getting these amazing, death chains. And you can literally see it. I'll cast like 6 or 7 Poison Novas like at the same time. And this was back before, like I said, I really knew how poison damage worked. And I thought that casting Poison Nova faster would mean more damage. But unfortunately, poison damage just doesn't work that way. And although the character did do exactly what I wanted him to do, the way that poison damage interacts with other poison damage made it not really a viable build. And it's unfortunate, because it was such a fun build to be able to just spam Poison Novas at like an amazing amount. You gotta think that, like, when I'm in the cow level and things start dying and I'm triggering multiple deaths, and every single time with a 50% chance to spawn Novas on the death of a monster, I was having, like, literally, there were some times where I had almost like 100 Poison Novas going off in a span of like 5 seconds. And also, as Samael just pointed out, the next hit delay also is very, very silly. So, like, if I ended up casting 2 Poison Novas at the same time, a monster couldn't be hit by both Poison Novas. So again, the idea behind the build was sound, but the mechanics behind the character, behind how the poison abilities work, just basically prevented it from being successful. If you do want to check out that video, though, that one is up. It's called the Spreading Plague, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just playing around with Poison Nova for 18 minutes. And as always, keep spreading plague.